Hello and welcome to our final module, Module 12, of your journey into Promised Land living. When my first son was born, we had an interesting first night at home. My wife had had an epidural that had gone bad, and she had lost spinal fluid, and she had what they called the spinal headache, the epidural headache. She was in agony. And when we brought our son home the first night, she literally had to go right to bed. And so I was doing everything I could to try to make the transition easy on her. And so I was trying to do pretty much the baby duty. And my son had colic, and he was crying and crying and crying, and he could not get comfortable, and he was in pain. And it was just an awful experience. And hours had gone by, and I thought he had finally settled down, and I was pretty much a zombie walking. I was so tired, and all of a sudden I heard him again, and I ran back up the stairs, and he's just screaming. You know how little babies do that, little tongue waggles, and they kind of do their fins all clisp, their faces all red, and I just felt so bad for my little son. I could tell he was in such pain. There was nothing I could do. So I picked him up, and I remember as I was holding him, looking at him, in that very moment, I realized the awesome responsibility that I had accepted when I had this child. And I was just overwhelmed and terrified. And in that moment, my mother-in-law, God bless her soul, walked into the room. She had been sleeping downstairs, and she was coming on to take her shift. And she's a wise lady. She read me like a book. She saw my face. She saw that I was thinking, oh my gosh, for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to deal with stuff. And she walked over, and she kind of patted me on the shoulder, and she took my son out of my arms, and she said, why don't you go downstairs and sleep for a little while? And I remember kind of nodding my head numbly and turning and walking downstairs, and some of the best sleep I ever had. I was so tired. And I remember when I woke up the next morning, I went upstairs, and there was my little son. He kind of passed through that little phase, and he was kind of cooing and googling and smiling at everyone, and I was so excited to see him. It was such a wonderful thing. And it was such a celebration of the reality that no matter what life brings your way, if you will just persevere and stay in the journey, there'll always be things to celebrate. The tough stuff will pass. My son's 18 years old now. And that little boy I used to hold in my hands like this, I literally could have held him in the palm of my hand. He can now hold me like that. He's a big, strapping guy. There's been all kinds of moments in our journey together that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. Some of them have been awesome. Some of them have been awful. But overall, it's all been good. And I will soon celebrate him walking down the aisle and graduating from high school and heading off into college. And we're all going to celebrate that together. Module 12 is about celebration. It's about looking at the lessons that you've learned through life and celebrating them. Some of the lessons are hard and painful, and you might not even like to think about them, but you have to celebrate that you went through it and that you learned from it, and God taught you how to persevere. Some of the celebrations that you'll be sharing with each other in this module are victories that you've experienced. Some of them are going to be the difficult journeys that you've survived, and all kinds of different things, because each of you have a unique journey with God. And as we celebrate those daily steps and those little milestones, we also want to celebrate the journey as a whole, because we want to remember to celebrate an incredibly good God who has given us the gift of life and who carries us through every step of the way and celebrates the joyous times with us and celebrates the tough times, because He's with us every step of the way in both. This module is about seeing God in whether the good or the bad, and celebrating His presence and His goodness and the things He teaches you through it. I hope you really enjoy this module, and I hope you've enjoyed your journey into Promised Land living.